What's up, y'all? Welcome back to the Tanner Farmstead podcast. I've got Ray Tyler with me today from Rose Creek Farms. Ray has been farming for a long time, arguably has one of the most successful farms in the country, and is a mentor of mine. Really respect you, Ray, and just thank you for taking the time to come on the podcast.
Great to be here, man.
So tell us a little bit, just kind of introduce yourself, where you located, um, how much area or space that you're farming. Just tell us a little bit about you, your family, and where y'all are at.
Yeah, so me and my wife, we started a farm here in West Tennessee. Uh, we really started out with about 2 acres, and then we kind of scaled back to one. And at our summer farm, we're completely covered with cat tunnels and high tunnels. I've got a wife and 6 children, and we started the farm back in 2010. Asha was almost a year and a half. Ahava was just born. And the vision was really to kind of provide a farm that our family could be a part of. So, fast forward now, my 2 daughters, they do all of our packing in a pack shed. They help me with markets. And so it's been a lot of fun now really watching them grow up and really be a large part of the farm and how we operate and sell. And I've got 4 younger boys. They're still trying, they're still growing up and trying to find their way into it. They're becoming more and more useful each year. But that's really the foundation of the farm, was really trying to make a farm that would be attractive to our children to be a part of. And that's still a work in progress, because every season the farm changes slightly, our family changes as they grow up. But we're growing lots of seasonal vegetables 52 weeks a year. And so all those offerings really change, but we're in year-round markets. And and so I think just kind of having a farm that really teaches our children how to work, the value of work. The way we kind of operate our family is, any house chores, we don't do any allowances, so everyone does house chores, but if any of our children do anything for the farm, they're going to get paid. And so we really try to build the farm where we're not just asking our children to help out the farm. Like, it's really, it's a real job. They get paid by the hour. And I think our children have really appreciated that type of, opportunity.
Yeah.
And if they want days off or weeks off, then that's completely fine. We don't make them work, but we give them a really good opportunity where if they want to have a job, it's there for them.
Yeah. No, I think that's I think a lot of people come out with it or come into it with that vision of just, I think there's something special about it. Cause like, for example, if I go to an office, it's like my kids never really get an idea of, what do you go off and do all day? We know you go to work, but for kids to be able to be involved with it, and then they get an idea of like, okay, I go do this and I get paid for it. It's not just
That's right.
Hey, here's a $20 allowance every month.
Yeah,
And that was part of it for us. Like that's always been part of the vision of just being able to have. I think there's something, and I know this goes a little more philosophical, but I think that this is the way it used to be. Like you got to raise up your kids alongside you within your work. Of course, that was 100 years ago, so things have changed. But I think there's something really valuable and special about that. I think people that probably get into this, that's probably an aspect that inspires them about this line of work, I would say.
Right. And, in the early years, it's very difficult, right? Yeah, because, when they're we decided to kind of allow them to work beside us. And it's not very efficient running a business with the little ones around.
Yeah.
But we really were working towards this end vision, and so we knew that um, taking that time to show them, and also making it where they didn't feel like if they didn't help around the farm, they were going to let us down.
Yeah.
And so that's a tedious balance to really play. Um, and so I think what we found over the years is, finding things that they could do well, short spurts of time. I think bringing them to markets have really helped, because what they found is that, if they're at the checkout or if they're helping in the market, a lot of adults really appreciate young people working. It's not something that's very common these
Yeah.
days. And so they were somewhat very used to us complimenting them, which we compliment them all the time, every day. And I think after a while, it's like, yeah, that's my dad and my mom. They're always complimenting. But when it comes from another adult, it's more meaningful for them,
Yeah.
because they go, oh, okay, it's not just my parents. Like, other people really see what we're doing. They really appreciate what we do.
Yeah.
And they're, because they've grown up in the farm, they have some knowledge of what we do, how we do it, and why. So as they've gotten older, they've been able to have a lot more intelligent conversations with customers. And so I think now that they kind of are seeing the whole picture, that they're really starting to understand each year, okay, I'm really starting to see how this farm works from seed to store. And
Yeah.
so understanding how all that works it's been really satisfying to watch. I would say the last 2 or 3 years, especially, it's
Hmm.
like, okay, all this hard work is really starting to pay off. When we started with the farm, we started with $150, no idea of what we're doing or how this is going to play out. And so it was definitely a grind, really, for those first 4 to 5 years. Just, it's one crop loss after another, one blow. It's, oh my goodness, we failed on tomatoes, and now we got to wait for another year to try this
Yeah.
again. And I think this is a very common experience that a lot of new growers have, of just, there's so much to learn, and it almost seems like there's more failures than successes, right? And so doing that with a small family was definitely not easy in those early years, but it's really starting to pay off.
I think.
With mine, yeah,
Go ahead.
it's
Sorry.
it's been very satisfying these last few years.
I think that's something that, which I have to preach to myself of, just, I think we nowadays, especially people that are younger, like my age, we kind of want this. We just want it to be easy. Like, we just want
Yeah,
to be able
that's
to build
right.
this overnight and it happen in a year or two. And because we look at people like you and other farmers or other businesses, and we're like, oh, look
Hmm.
where they're at. And it's like, well, yeah, you don't
Right.
realize it's like that's been a 10-15 year journey for them to get there.
Exactly. Yes.
And so, like, for y'all, when y'all first started, which when y'all first started, there wasn't near the amount of information that there is
No.
now. So I'm sure at that time it was just kind of like, hey, we're just going to grow stuff and try to sell it. But fill us in a little bit of the journey of, because when y'all started, weren't y'all doing a lot more stuff with livestock, with
Yes,
chickens
that's
and
right.
pigs and things like that? And then at what point did y'all kind of begin the transition to really focusing on a lot of those high value crops that y'all are growing now?
Yep. So in 2010, we started off with just produce. We had gotten a few pigs in that first year to turn over some leaves. And of course, those pigs grew rapidly. and we had to figure out what to do with it. And we found some customers who expressed interest in buying some pork. So we decided to just try that. And that went really well. Then we started to get into some chickens. And so we were really, because what was happening with produce is that I wasn't able to dial in consistent produce every single week. Where if you process a pig or a chicken, that can stay in the freezer, and whatever you don't sell that one Saturday is still gonna be good in that freezer the next Saturday.
Yep.
So I found, hey, yes, it is expensive to get into, but once you have it, I was able to have more consistent product to sell each week, especially in the wintertime. And I still love the produce, but I needed cash flow every single week. And so I wasn't able to really dial in the produce. Spring and fall is easy to grow produce, but it's that peak summer, peak winter. That's where I really had a hard time keeping consistent production of high quality produce. So the animals, and this is the case with any kind of business, is that there's definitely this there's this really a economy of scale where if you just have a few pigs, right, and you're having to travel 2 or 3 hours away to get them processed back, you've got freezers, you got showing up. The cost is really, showing up to feed pigs. The cost is loading them up, going to processing. And so you can either raise 2 pigs at a time, or you can raise 20. And so then it was just that process of scaling that up. And all those things, we didn't have a lot of land to grow livestock, and livestock does take a fair amount of land compared to produce. So around 2014, 2015, we really started to kind of dial in the meat production. We really dialed in our own processing of the birds. My wife is incredibly fast at eviscerating. But I still really loved growing produce. And so what I was finding is doing both was challenging. We still weren't at a place, and we really wanted this to be a family affair. And so we weren't really too keen on hiring full-time staff. And so what we just found ourselves was trying to do both really well with just me and my wife and, 4 little kids was very challenging. And finding really good, reliable help was also a challenge part-time. So in 2015, all this, we really were starting to kind of hit our stride with the meat. And while we were really dialing in production of meat, and our scale of meat was about 60 hogs a year. I think we were around 3,000 to 4,000 broilers a year, processing several hundred turkeys a year, several hundred laying hens. So it wasn't a small homestead. Like it was.
Yeah, that's pretty, in my opinion, that's pretty, that's an operation.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, and early on in 2010, I realized that we had demand for lettuce production, but I needed to figure out how to have it every single week of the season, especially in summer when markets were at its peak. And so around that 2015 time, I really started to close that growing gap. And then our daughter came down with stage 4 cancer. So they gave her a few weeks to live. This was in spring, right before we were getting our new fresh batch of broilers. Tomatoes were about to go in. And so everything kind of came to a screeching halt, right? And which our daughter's fully recovered, completely cancer-free, which we are very grateful for. So it was at that time when my wife and I had to think, okay, Ashley, needed to be full-time stay-at-home nurse. So I was doing all the work myself, everything. And I realized really quickly that I could only do this for so long, and also being a business owner and doing all the labor, all the selling, all the business part of it, plus having time and energy for my family was becoming a real challenge.
Mm.
And so I found myself going, okay, this is really no longer becoming fun.
Yeah.
Like, it's just so much to do with just one person. So what we decided to do was we did pause the livestock. We kind of sold it to a former Polyface farm intern. He kind of came in the area. So we kind of sold him all of our livestock, all of our equipment for the most part, all of our sales, customers. And then that 2015 season is when I really dialed in my lettuce production for the winter. For the summer, sorry. And so I had some really incredible produce opportunity. And so 2016, we decided, hey, we're going to go to an 8-hour work day, 5 days a week. And I'm going to really just focus on vegetable production. Because by then, I really kind of knew what to do. I just needed to have the time to really focus on it. And so I also, what I had learned was I also needed to work myself out of a job. Because what had happened is when we had to really deal with Asha, our income stopped because I didn't have anybody working for us.
Yeah.
And, we almost lost the farm. It was really scary. So that taught me that I needed to set up systems where the farm can work without me.
Mm-hmm.
And so at that time, that year, really 2016, it was, okay, we're going to make this work on an 8-hour work day. I'm going to start really simplifying our growing systems and then start hiring people to work those systems. And, with the ultimate goal of me never having to do any physical labor on the farm. So in case anything happens to my family again, I can at least, the business can keep going, we can keep getting paid, and we won't lose the farm.
Yeah.
Yep. And so that's
No,
kind of really where we're at now.
yeah, I think there's a couple things I want to dive deeper into on that topic, because I think a lot of times, obviously, when anybody's starting a farm and any business for that matter, if I don't think that way, like you're thinking there, I essentially just I've created a job for myself. And if I, at any point, break a leg or am decommissioned or something happens, like for example, what you just shared, it doesn't run without me showing up. But also I understand you've got to scale that business to a certain point to where it's like you can hire a full-time person and pay them well where they actually want to come work for you. So backing up a little bit, y'all's at this point, and even in this time frame that you're talking about now, what were y'all's kind of major sales outlets that y'all were selling most of what y'all were growing?
Back in that time, in 2016, we actually had landed a really nice wholesale account. It was a food hub. And they had wanted a large quantity of, I think, 5 different types of produce. And so that was the majority of it. We also had landed some restaurants. That was really important for us. We had some markets, but we didn't really have a good market that we were willing to set up at. And because I just was really focusing on just a few varieties, markets don't really work if you only have 5 to 10 crops. You got to have a lot more variety.
Yeah.
And so at that time, we were just really focused on wholesale.
Okay. But now fast forward to now, most of y'all's is retail through markets, correct?
That's correct. So we have online store, we have markets, on farm store. And so, yes, so currently right now, we're definitely heavy on markets.
Yeah. So for other market farmers, and I'm just curious too, in your opinion, at what point does a market garden, for example, need to get to in sales before they could actually hire someone, quote unquote, full time? Like, where do you need to be roughly? And I know that there's so many factors to that,
Yeah, yeah.
but
Well, a good rule of thumb is 30% of your gross sales needs to go to labor. So if you're making, say, um, you know, $2,100 a week, right? Let's just say, then 700 of that can be allocated towards labor. So
yeah,
maybe that is a full-time person.
yeah,
Uh, so that's kind of a good, where we started was part-time,
yeah,
right? And so we found, hey, okay, I'm going to hire someone part-time to seed my greenhouse, bed prep, planting. So they're going to work 2 or 3 days a week. And then, that was one season. Another season, once we had this food hub, a lot of the work was in packaging, washing and packaging. That's one area where I don't enjoy working in the pack shed.
mm-hmm.
And so we were able to hire 2 high school or 2 homeschool students, and they would work, one morning a week, just getting everything all washed and packaged and ready for delivery.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I look at that. Is like, if you're making $1,000 a week, then you're looking at, maybe $300 of that going towards labor. But what you also got to pay yourself.
Yeah.
Right. So, what we did is we just worked really hard, just my wife and I, really working up to this. Like, first early years, especially if you don't have any money, then every dime of profit needs to go back into the business, building that up. And this really goes to any kind of business, not just agriculture.
For sure.
If you're starting a bakery, right, you're going to be working, 16, 20 hours a day for the first few years, right? So you're going to be washing dishes and mopping floors and doing all the orderings, all the mixing, until you can really get enough cash flow where you could hire that one person to help you do whatever it is. And then, so yeah, it does take time. It doesn't happen overnight. It's not like the first year of a business, you can just out the gate hire whoever you want and pay them whatever you want.
Yeah.
It just takes time. It takes money. You got to get your systems built. You got to get sales established. You need cash flow.
Yeah.
And so this is really just any business takes a few years to really get it going. A lot of business barely makes it past 5 years. And so farming is, if you're a first generation farmer, you're looking at a good 5 years of just grinding it out, taking risk. There's going to be a lot of setbacks, a lot of failures, a lot of unexpected weather events that will wreck, crops, unexpected sales. Maybe you lose clients, accounts, or just so many things that can go wrong. And so it really does take a good, I would say, easy 5 years just to figure out what crops you're going to grow, who are you going to sell those to, can you get labor to do this, can you set up a farm to work without, but if you start up with the end goal in mind and just start working towards that, it gets much, much easier.
Yeah.
Much easier.
What would you say, like, from your experience of helping a lot of their farmers, be successful, and just, in your journey of helping others, what would you say is kind of the biggest mistake that you've seen growers make, like on the front end when they're starting out in those first few years, or even in the very beginning?
Not focusing on sales.
And expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, so um uh you need to be able to sell your product at a price where you're profitable. And so I think farmers market, or maybe they'll have a CSA or a grocery store, and they're only focusing on one. Where I think having as many outlets available, and kind of building them all up at the same time. Because what ends up happening is, let's just say, if you're all on grocery stores, that's all you have. What happens when a regional market manager gets fired, and then there's a new one, and they want to switch to a different vendor, and then all your eggs are in one basket.
Yep.
So I think having a diversified income stream and market outlets is really wise, because then if you lose one, then you still have others to kind of help float you over until you can get some other additional markets. So I think once we started to really get every market stream there was, right, where we were doing grocery stores, food hubs, CSAs, markets, online, like we did as many different outlets as possible. And then once we kind of found, okay, this market stream, I think they're paying us more. We're able to get volume. This is really working. Let's really go all in on that. At the same time, we wouldn't disregard the other outlets. Now, as long as they were in our route and we were able to have enough products and they were paying enough, we still kind of kept those online.
Yeah.
But having market outlets is really important, because you need to be able to sell every single pound of produce you grow. Every pound. Like nothing needs to be going to the compost pile.
There's nothing worse.
There's nothing worse.
Yeah.
Growing is the easy part, which
Yeah.
sounds insane, right? It's selling it at a price that keeps you in business. Because once you have market demand and you know you can sell, then it's just a matter of, okay, well, now I can't grow enough. Well, all right, well, buy another cap tunnel, hire someone part-time to help you grow that product. Here's a real good practical example. In 2016 was really the first year that I was able to dial in lettuce product 52 weeks a year. So once I had a whole 52-week season where I always had lettuce product to sell, then I started to go, okay, the growing is not holding me back, it's the selling. So I had a grocery store account. They wanted 100 pounds a week. They're paying me a really good price, but they needed it year round. So now I have that sale, plus all the other outlets. So what I did with that is I hired someone part-time just to make sure that they did all my seeding, bed prep, planting, and harvest. That's all they did. And it was just part-time, a few days a week. And that part-time employee helped keep that cash flow going. Right. And so once that cash flow flywheel was going, it made more than enough to pay their few days salary, plus plus I had profit from that account that I was able to roll into my other farm production. And it just kind of, that once I got that cash wheel, once I got that cash flywheel flowing, it was just much easier to get another account, hire another part-time person or a full-time person. So for me, it was really just focusing on sales. And so ever since, I think 2016 is when I really started to get as many outlets as possible.
Yeah.
I just found that nothing lasts forever. Grocery stores go out of business, food hubs close down, markets change management, and it's no longer what it used to be 5 years ago. And so I am always trying to anticipate changes in the marketplace because it's always changing.
Yeah. No, it's a good lesson because I mean, I think farmers that were growing in 2020 that were heavily relying on farmers markets, I mean, that's a prime example.
Yep.
They get shut down overnight, and if that's your only sales outlets, I mean, you got to pivot fast.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great example. So in 2020, 75% of our barn sales were wholesale, and all that dried up in 1 week. Like, just there was no warning. Just luckily, I did have online already started, and I had one farmers market. Actually, two farmers market. One market was shut down, the other one kept going.
Yeah.
So because I had that one good market and online, and luckily everybody was going online, that really helped save me. But
Yeah.
if that was 100% wholesale, it would have been really tough to keep doors open.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of farmers who just could not make that pivot. And
Yeah.
just it was the last year for them.
Golly. It's I mean, it doesn't matter if it's for any bit. I just know it can be ruthless.
Ruthless.
That's
Like
just
the market does not care about you.
yeah.
It just does not care. And so, that just understanding that and being ready for any one of these market streams to dry up and having a backup plan is really important.
Do you think that growers starting out try to do too much and grow crops that aren't, like just try to focus on trying to do way too much, but also partly growing half their crops or stuff that's just not high value crops? Do you see that a lot as well?
For sure. So I think in the first year of any grower, you kind of want to grow as many things as possible, because there's so for new growers, there's really two things. One is you're trying to figure out what you can grow in your microclimate, right? So you're trying to figure out what crops you can grow in your soils, in your microclimate, and you also want to see what crops will sell.
Mm-hmm.
Just because you can grow green beans, amazing green beans, doesn't mean you can sell it at a good price to keep you in business.
Yeah.
So there's really two things. You need to find out what you can grow, and you need to find out what you can sell. And so that first year needs to be kind of like this growing / market research, right? Then once you kind of have this idea, and for me it was lettuce. Like, I just knew 2010 right off the gate, this was the crop. I did a bunch of different things, but that was the one that everybody wanted.
Yeah.
And it was the one crop that I felt like if I focused on it, I could figure this out. So for someone else, it could be, cabbage or broccoli, whatever that crop is. You need to figure out what 5 to 10 crops that you can grow well, and which one of those will make you profit.
Mm-hmm.
Then that second year, really start to dial that in. And so I know for me, I grew 50 different crops the first year, and then that second year I really dialed that in, because I kind of knew, okay, I'm going to grow 15 different crops. And really every single year I kind of that list got smaller and smaller, because I realized, okay, I can grow really good kale, chard, salad mix, head lettuce, and let's just say collards really well. And I have sales for those. So I'm going to focus on that to make sure that I'm profitable and that I'm not growing things just for fun. I'm going to really keep this about the business.
Yeah.
And then, once you get really comfortable and really excellent at growing and selling those few crops every single week, then you can kind of branch out into other things that may not be as profitable, but it still helps with the overall cash flow.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I mean, you've got to figure out what you can sell, And if
Right.
it's like, for example, microgreens, it's like if someone wants to just strictly start a microgreen operation, and it's like there's a million other microgreen operations, like, it's gonna be tough.
It can be tough.
Because they've already got all those restaurants account. I mean, just yeah. I mean,
That's right. Yeah, like a good example in West Tennessee is in the summertime, everybody grows squash and zucchini,
yeah,
and they're practically giving it away. So yeah, so I can grow squash and zucchini just fine, but I can't compete in the marketplace because the market's flooded. I think going into farming for the first 2 or 3 years, not expecting to really make money. Like and taking those first few years and really figuring out what it is you're going to focus on.
yeah,
If you can really dial in your focus of what crops and what market outlets, then after that second year, you can really dial that in and get very laser focused on production, sales, profit.
yeah, yeah. And I feel like for a lot of small, 1 acre or less, market farms. I mean, those. I feel like for not all of them, but I'd say most of them, like the lettuce and the root and the baby roots and all that is the foundation.
It is.
Because it's just, I mean, you talk about it in one of in your course, the lettuce master class.
Yep.
I bought that in 2019. I remember the very beginning of that course, you talk about just the lettuce industry in general, and just, I mean, I think most people, if they eat a vegetable, like a lot of people eat a good quality lettuce.
Absolutely. It's a
Um,
massive industry in this country that I think, if your local marketplace isn't too saturated with small growers growing the crop, it's one of those crops with focus you can dial in it.
yeah. What do you think is possible? So, for example, how much? When I know y'all expanded some, but prior to this new expansion, how much area have y'all been growing on? Has it been an acre?
Yeah. So the last several years have been an acre. I think we have 8,300-foot beds.
Okay. And if you don't,
Undercover.
if you're willing to share, what have been kind of y'all's gross sales over the past several years?
Yeah, so we're I think last year we were around 650,000. Year before, I think it was like 550. So that's kind of been kind of our trend the last few years.
And what do you think is possible? Like I know sometimes people give like an idea of like, oh, if you've got an acre market farm,
Right.
or half an acre or a quarter acre, like here's what is quote unquote possible. And I know that's very dependent on what
Right.
crop, like you're going to have to grow high value crops to hit those high numbers.
That's right.
But like, what do you say? Like, for example, let's take a quarter acre, a half acre. Like, what do you think is doable on that amount of land?
I think if you had a half an acre of land and this is under tunnels, so
Yes.
it's not open field.
Okay.
Because those tunnels will help you extend the season, especially on the shoulder season. That's really important, be able to plant on time. But if you have enough help and you never miss a seeding and a planting and a harvest, and you really are focused on soil health, that's really important. I think a lot of, at least in my experience, the lack of sales was often tied to the poor quality of crops I grew.
Hmm.
So once I really dialed in my crop health, my yields went up and I was able to make a lot more sales from a bed of lettuce, now than I did even 5 years ago. So I'm getting higher yields, and every head of lettuce is almost sellable, where maybe 5 or 6 years ago, maybe only 80% of it what was good. But now I can hit that 90 to 95, in some cases almost 100%. So yeah, I would say I don't think it's if you have the demand, retail. This is not wholesale.
Yeah.
But if you're retail where you're direct to consumer, there's no middleman. I think it's not unreasonable for someone on a half acre to make $250,000 a year, right?
You've proven it,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
it's possible.
yeah. Yeah. Now that's with help, and that's making sure that you're selling everything you grow. And there's still some weeks, like there's still room for me to make more gross income, because there's still some weeks of the season where I'm not selling every single item I'm producing.
Yeah.
Like some weeks it's like, wow, we got 183 pounds of Salanova from this bed when it's normally 100, right? So there's always room for improvement in my sale. This is why I'm just such a big advocate of make sure that you have enough outlets to sell your product.
Yeah. Do you think people sometimes can jump to like, hey, I'm going to start growing on a half acre, but they don't really have a single sales outlet yet? Because when I think about that, it kind of gives me a little anxiety of like the amount of work I'm going to do. But it's like if I don't have a proven trend of like, here's where I'm at with sales and here's how much I can sell, or I think I can sell through this outlet. But if I'm starting from ground zero and I have no sales outlet other than maybe, hey, we're going to go to this farmer's market, I don't know. That kind of scares me. And I know that there's a certain level that you've got to jump in and get started, but at the same time, which I know Curtis talks about this in the Urban Farmer. He's like, I'd rather grow just enough and be a little bit short than I'm composting bags of lettuce or whatever.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. So if you're starting out and you're a first generation farmer and you're just getting into this, like, no more than 20 beds, right? Or maybe it's 40, 50-foot beds.
Yeah.
Where, some of ours are tarped and they're staggered, and you're just slowly getting into this. It really also depends on like how much land, how much time do you have, how much risk are you willing to take, how much money are you willing to kind of, throw at crops, get help. There's a lot of really factors into how someone's first few years could look like.
Yeah.
To me, there's really no rules in how to do this. It really is up to the operator on how much risk, capital, time, and end goal. What does that look like?
Yeah.
Because then once you kind of know your end goal, and then say if a person goes, hey, at the end of the day, I want to pay my family $100,000 a year. After everything gets paid, then you can start working yourself. You start working your plan backwards. Okay, well, I need, okay, well, if I'm going to pay myself this much, then I need to make X amount of dollars. And then it's, do you want to do all the work yourself, which you could do? Maybe you're a single person, don't have any kids, and you can pull that off. Or it's, no, I actually do have a lot of little kids, and I don't want to spend 20 hours a day working. So then maybe you got to get some help. So maybe it takes you a little bit longer to get to your goal. So again, I think if a person starts with what's the end goal, how much resource and capital do you have, sales outlets, then you can really start making a business plan to start working your way to your ultimate end goal.
Yeah. Yeah. What would you say? And I've made some content on this before because I think starting out, I always felt a little frustrated from people that were people within the farming world of like, hey, you can start out with start your farm for $3,000 or whatever.
Yeah.
I always personally felt a little frustrated by that because as I got into it, I realized I kind of need a lot more than that.
Oh yeah.
Um, so for me personally, I always just it kind of rubbed me the wrong way because I'm like, just give me like a. I'd rather you tell me like, hey, you in reality, like this is a healthy number for you to be able to start and get some basic infrastructure. What would you say? And I'm talking very baseline. What do you feel like is a good number of like, hey, if you're trying to just start a market farm and get like very basic infrastructure in place, here's a healthy number that would be ideal if you had that amount of capital to start. What would you say that is? And again, I know there's so many factors that go into that.
That's right. That's right. Man, if I were to start over, um, from scratch, brand new farm, no money, I feel like $20,000 is obviously I started with a lot less. I started with $150, but that was a hard road, and I would not want to do that again. Like I don't want to be stoking a wood stove in the middle of the night. Keep in mind my green, like
Yeah.
I just don't want to do that again. I'm not 26 anymore. So I think if you're gonna do this as any business takes money and capital. So if I were to do another business, I would want to have at least $20,000. You need this for basic coolers,
Yeah.
and tools, irrigation, just handling material, having money for good quality compost fertilizer,
Yeah.
money for good quality seeds. You don't have to build a greenhouse. You can buy transplants from another grower, but there's some basic things you got to have.
Yeah.
You need a reliable vehicle, or you need to have capital to pay a delivery driver, right? So if you're going to have a business, you got to have some sort of capital to really make it go at it.
Yeah.
Yes, you can bootstrap this, absolutely. But it's like, my goodness, if you're looking for any kind of quality of life with family and friends, $20,000 can really shave off 5 years on your journey.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense. I mean, you can just even outside of Caterpillar tunnels. I mean, again, like you said, there's just very basic stuff that you've kind of got to have to start. You've got to
really
more than likely you're going to have to get compost and like you said, fertilizer. You're going to need to run irrigation. Your frost cloth and some landscape fabric. I mean, just very very basic stuff, but it adds up. I mean, it adds up pretty quick.
It really does. It really adds up. It really does. And again, you can bootstrap and start with a few $100s. We did.
Yeah.
But I don't recommend that to anybody. I really don't. And it's not necessary. You can go, get a job, work a year, save up. In the meantime, start making a business plan, figuring out what is your goal, how much money do you want to make in 5 years, figure out what pieces of infrastructure will make you the most money. There's tools out there and infrastructure that's not necessary to start a business. You don't need a $50,000 greenhouse.
Yeah.
You don't need $15,000 in tools.
Yep.
But you do need water. You gotta have it.
Yeah.
You do need transportation. You do need some type of cooling. I mean, there's no way to have good quality product, at least in the Mid South where I'm from, without some sort of cooling, whether it's a cool bot, a trailer, something. Um, just basic, knives and tools, really good high quality irrigation system. Those things you can't, I don't know a good way to grow good quality crops without it.
Yeah. You think it's good? Go ahead.
Well, I'm just saying, like, having a good website, a lot of the stuff you can do it yourself, but if you're not computer savvy, you need to hire someone to help you do a basic site. Again, these are all just, if you were to start any kind of business, there's some sort of capital to really make this a viable business that's going to make cash.
For sure. I mean, and shoot, I mean, it's not, I mean, when you look at other businesses, I mean, there's a lot of other businesses that require a lot more upfront capital.
Oh, yes. Yes. And 20,000 is like, that's bare bones. Like, you're still, that doesn't get you very far. It doesn't get you very far. Yeah. I would say, if, let's just say if you go, if you want to make $100,000 a year, you need to be thinking about having $50,000 in capital.
Yeah.
Either invested or have that available, right? So it just takes it takes capital to really have the tools and infrastructure to make that kind of cash flow. There's a lot to it. There's getting your transplants, planting, irrigation, soil fertility, tax shed, there's cooling, and then getting that stuff transported to that customer.
Yeah, there's just so many.
Too many moving
There's
parts.
just there's such a learning curve of,
big learning curve.
Again, like you said, just mastering getting really good transplants. It's like, I mean, gosh, I mean that just you just don't have it overnight. It's just everything takes time to learn, and
that's right.
That's just part of the journey.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
But yeah, it definitely takes money.
It does take money, and again, I start with $150, but I don't recommend that just because of how hard it is. And we were determined. We really, we kind of knew what we wanted, and so we were willing to eat dirt. Right? We knew it was going to be a hard road for the first 5 years.
Yeah.
But if we could have had $20,000 to $30,000, it would have given us more energy and the infrastructure to really make work much more efficient.
Yeah. Well, and I think I got a fly flying around me. I think that like something that we still do now is like we basically try to have it, and this may be our last year doing it, of where basically we have other jobs, income streams, and everything with the farm. We're pretty much just trying to reinvest, and it's painful because it's like you want to be able to live, you want to be able to pay yourself, and there's a fine line, I think, with all that. But I don't know. I feel like that can be helpful for people. Like you said, if you just start it part time, it gives you an idea of everything with your sales outlets and just being able to grow it, and then maybe eventually you can make the jump and be full time or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, for the first 2 years of farming, I was part time, so I wasn't full time.
Yeah.
So, I had a young family, a wife and two children, so we had to keep, our family taken care of while investing into the business. And because the business took time, right? Farming is seasonal, so it's not like in a factory where you're producing car parts. Right.
Sure.
That's just, year round. There's a lot of seasonality in farming.
Yeah.
And so you kind of have to ride that wave of change until you really get into the rhythm of seeding, planting, harvesting, sales, and markets, and demand. There's a lot of moving parts and pieces. It takes a few years to really understand.
Yeah, I mean, because you've got just different. Your rate of growth is way different in the winter than than
That's
it is
right.
in the summer. And then you figure out, oh, well, if I want that crop in December or in January, if I'm growing into the winter, I've got to seed it during this time.
That's
It
right.
is. I mean, I'm still learning that curve
Yeah.
of this. Oh
Yeah.
crap! Well, I didn't
It's
seed
like,
this, so now I don't have it.
that's right. It's like, in June, I'm going to start seeding celery for the 2025 harvest season during that winter and early spring.
Yeah,
It's not that far away where I got to be thinking about next year.
yeah, it makes sense.
And
I
it
want to
just
do a
takes
quick
time.
as we start to kind of land the plan. I want to do some quick rapid fire questions at you, and you just answer them
Yeah, man.
as best you can. If you had only one piece of equipment or tool to buy for a farm, what would it be? And I know it's tough, but
Um, hmm, that's a great question. I would say, landscape fabric. I'm not sure if that's a tool or not.
no,
I'm
it
pretty
is.
sure,
That
but
could be a
it
tool.
it replaces so many tools.
Oh, I know it does.
Yeah, yeah.
I
So
thought you would either say Caterpillar tunnels or I never actually thought about landscape fabric, but that's a great one.
yeah,
I agree.
yeah, yeah. It's pretty good.
Okay.
It'll make you money fast.
Yeah. Favorite crop to grow?
I would have say the last bit. I really enjoyed growing cabbage.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's not a very profitable crop by itself, but I really do like it. Our family loves sauerkraut, and so it's one of
Yeah.
these crops where um, it takes a long time to grow. Only grows a certain time of the season, but it's one of those crops I do really enjoy growing a lot.
And to follow that up, the one you hate the most.
Oh man, my goodness, that's a great one. I'm gonna say okra.
Oh gosh, me too.
I just hate picking it. I'm not a big okra fan.
Yeah,
It's just yeah. It's unless I have someone else to plant it and harvest it, I'm not gonna.
I would agree.
Yeah.
Outside of I know we talked about the big mistake you were saying uh, new farmers make is not focusing on sales. But if you had to give one other piece of advice for just aspiring market farmers, what would be that one nugget that you would give them?
Find a mentor. You need a cheerleader because farming is very very tough and it can be very discouraging and it's also a very lonely occupation. There's there's not a lot of farmers left in this country, and you need to find someone to help you feel not so alone and that you know tough times are going to happen and you'll get on the other side of it. But having a mentor, someone to really just help you get through the tough times, encourage you, man, is vital, I think.
Yeah, gosh, I would agree with that. I mean, that's what you've been for me, and gosh, I mean, a mentor gives you just a good blueprint too. That
It's amazing.
yeah,
I had a mentor in my first few years. He was an older gentleman, and even though we had different goals, once or twice a year I would see him, and it was just great just to have someone go, hey, this is okay. It was a hard season for everyone. Just keep going.
yeah, that's so good. What would you say is the biggest con to running a market farm? And that may be hard to find, just obviously being in the industry, but
Yeah. Um, Really, I just think dealing with weather.
yeah,
It is just very, very challenging.
yeah,
It's just yeah, it the weather affects so much on agriculture that it's just hard. It's hard to deal with and work around.
yeah. No, as you say that, we've got 40, 50 mile wind gusts all days, and
It's
I know
crazy.
it's stressing the crops. It's just we grow in
It's
the field.
crazy.
That's just part of it.
Yep.
What would you, on the flip side, what would you say is the biggest pro?
Oh man, I just think um being in control of your food.
Yeah.
Like if everything hits the fan, farmers, everyone has to eat. Like we can do without cars, fancy houses, luxury clothes, but we all have to eat.
Yeah.
And, we saw this in 2020 during COVID. Like everybody was trying to find a farmer that they could become friends with.
Yeah.
And I had friends from years and years ago, all of a sudden, hey, how can we ensure that we're going to eat if indeed, grocery stores can't get food? So it goes to show that, at the end of the day, people have to eat. And I think it's a pretty incredible occupation to be a part of, knowing that, what you do really matters. And it's very, very important for all of humanity.
Yeah. 100%, man. And then last question, as we wrap up here, what would you say is the biggest, from your experience, what would you say is the biggest waste of money that you see on small scale farms?
I think buying fancy tools, that's
Yeah.
just really not necessary. You can spend, I've done this myself. Yeah, it's just, you think the shiny new tool is going to help you make money. It doesn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't.
No, that makes sense. Well, Ray, I appreciate you taking the time to come on the podcast and share your story and experience. And I've gotten a lot of value from it. I know the people that take a listen will as well. So thank you.
Great to be here, Tanner.